if you're watching the video version of this and you just look at me here, right? What makes Drew Ramsey and Eileen, each of us, is only 27,000 genes. That's it. 27 and 3 zeros. That's all the parts that it takes to make a human. Those are all the proteins you need.
Welcome to the Lavendaire Lifestyle, the podcast on personal growth and lifestyle design. My name's Eileen, and I'm here to guide you to shine as your brightest self and create your dream life. We all have a light within and the power to create a life we love. Every Sunday, we'll share thoughtful conversations exploring how we can build a better future for ourselves and our world. Life is an art. Make it your masterpiece. Hello, my loves. Welcome back to the Lavendaire Lifestyle Podcast. It's Eileen. Today's episode is on mental fitness and nutritional psychiatry. So what foods and nutrients do we need to nourish our brain and mental health? And how can we change the way we think about constructing our meals for better nutrition? We also cover the 9 evidence-based tenets to cultivating a healthy and happy life, which is all part of mental fitness. Our guest today is Drew Ramsey. Drew Ramsey, MD, is a board-certified psychiatrist, 5-time author, and leading voice in nutritional psychiatry and integrative mental health. He is a fellow of the American Psychiatric Association and the founder of the Brain Food Clinic and Spruce Mental Health. For 20 years, he served as an assistant clinical professor of psychiatry at Columbia University, where he taught and supervised psychotherapy and nutritional psychiatry. Quick reminder before we get started. If you've been craving a fresh start with powerful structure, the 2026 Artist of Life Workbook is your perfect end-of-year ritual. It's our best-selling guided journal that helps you reflect, dream big, and create real change in 2026. They're selling fast, so head to shop.lavendaire.com to get yours. Now, on to the episode. Hello, Drew. Welcome to the podcast. So excited to have you. How are you feeling today?
I'm doing great, Eileen. Thank you so much for having me here. And I've been seeing patients all day, so that's always pretty gratifying work. So I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Let's start with your story. So you're a psychiatrist, author, and pioneer in nutritional psychiatry. What inspired you to start connecting food with mental health?
First, I grew up on a farm and I was always interested in food. Actually, in college, I was vegetarian, and part of that like low-fat vegetarian movement for about 10 years in terms of how I ate, but also just like thinking about how food impacted my health. That was part of like my family's cultural values. My parents were like hippies who ate organic food back in the 70s and grew a lot of our food. So I think that really impacted how I approach mental health and how I think about mental health, how I've always kind of looked for and tried to understand ways that more natural settings impact our mental health and our brain. I mean, that's kind of where our brains evolved. So it's always been just, apparent to me. And by the way, hi, everybody listening, but I bet it's been apparent to you too. You go to the edge of the beach, if you like the beach, and you get this different feeling. You go deep into the forest and something happens to your nervous system, and it's very cool. And so as I've been involved with patients on the clinical side as a physician and a psychiatrist focusing on mental health, I was listening for these things in people's lives, like, both the suffering and what's wrong and how you can be helpful, but also like, where are the little parts of people's lives that are like deep pools of health? A trip to the forest. Is it the park? Is it their dancing class? Like, where do they light up a little bit more? And so I think for me, nutrition and nutritional psychiatry and being really one of the first people thinking about that in America, of really how do we get that more within our institutions, how we teach about psychiatry, how do we really get excited and talk about the evidence publicly so people don't just think about psychiatry as, Prozac or long painful therapies, but also there's all this new science about brain health and brain growth and inflammation. And food ties right to that. And I find people are just more excited, right? I say, wow, tell me your favorite magnesium food. And you don't have one at your fingertips. You don't say, wow, I love almonds or geez, beans and greens. But you say, you kind of pause. That's fascinating to me, especially in the wellness world, right? Where we all know some of these nutrients, like everybody in the wellness world listening knows omega-3 fats and seafood are great for their mental health. And and important, right? So I just got very curious. Like, what's the science behind that? How good is the science behind that? And then just like real simple farm boy, like I have patients in front of me every day. They look to me for good evidence-based information, not wishy-washy stuff, not, I don't know, foods that really help me in my mental health. Like that's really low quality help. What's really helpful is looking at the evidence and then specifically applying that to an individual. I can tell you all day long, seafood's good for you. If you don't like wild salmon, and all I give you is wild salmon recipes, or you really don't like seafood, I'm not actually achieving my goal of getting more B vitamins, more long-chain omega-3 fats, more iodine, more complete protein, all that stuff into your system.
It's interesting because a lot of people understand that things like food and environment are so helpful to them, but you're right. It's typical psychiatrists aren't taught these things. So how did you begin to bridge that gap? Did you have to go find the evidence yourself so that it becomes more important? Because it seems so natural, but it's something that I guess is not as studied.
It's much more studied than ever before. So everybody, we're all at this very cool point in human history where we know more about the brain. Even than when I trained, I finished my training in 2004, and we didn't know about the glymphatic system, how the brain gets rid of waste. We didn't really know a lot about this idea of neuroplasticity, that the brain grows and creates new brain cells. Nobody was thinking about brain inflammation. So when I sit with patients, I'm thinking a lot about like, how is inflammation regulated in this person? What do they eat? How do they move their bodies? How do they regulate stress? So that's all new information, but I totally agree. And I wonder if everyone listening kind of have this experience where it's like, we all know it, the way that we eat, like what we eat affects how we feel. We all know that when we're in a more organized spot, I call it like a more balanced spot. I'm not a big believer in moderation because there's just probably a lot of stuff these days in the grocery store you shouldn't eat, just to be blunt about it. But I do believe in really high quality, high enjoyment, high deliciousness factor in terms of food and meal plans. And in terms of how it started, it really started with a few studies, and I get into this in Healing the Modern Brain and in the book prior to this, Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety, talking a little bit about the history of nutritional psychiatry and where it comes from, and how it started really with a set of studies looking at things like omega-3 fats. Those were kind of starting to get a buzz around them. It's like 2002. I was still a resident, and I was not eating seafood. I actually didn't like seafood. I grew up on a farm in Indiana, not a lot of fresh fish. And if so, it was like fish sticks in the cafeteria, like yuck. Wasn't part of my palate, wasn't part of my culture. And then you're sitting there as like a brain health person, right? Okay, if this nutrient is so important for brain health and so important for my brain health, and I'm not eating it, what do I do? Do I take a supplement? Well, what's the evidence for that? What do I tell my patients who eat depression? And that just kind of led to the first, well, I should certainly ask if they eat seafood, right? And you're asking like, what did I do? I just kind of sat with this moment like I didn't. And then it kind of like, oh, same thing with B12, right? I should ask them if they eat these foods, right? And I was like, wow, we weren't being taught to. And I think that's just been kind of my mission for the last 20 years, like real simple, like what food, what nutrients are the most important. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about the antidepressant food scale that I wrote with Laura LaChance, or we can talk some about, how you enact this. We have our free mental fitness kitchen with our great coach and chef, Emily Berner, every quarter, just to bring everyone in our community together to cook and eat. So that's really fun, where people really around the country, sometimes around the world, will be, cooking, and Emily leads us in these great set of recipes. And we talk about the nutrients. There's all kinds of ways to enact this, but where it's gone for me is really starting with this question: what are the foods that are most important for my patient's mental health? And then as I became an old person for my mental health, and then it's actually not true, just for my whole life, like for me too. And then as I became a husband and a father, and I have some complicated genetics like the rest of you maybe. And so just wanted to do my best. What habits should I help these kids develop so they, again, per the evidence, per my experience as a psychiatrist, they have what they need to have their best shots at having a great and fulfilling life.
All right, my loves, time for a short break. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. December invites us to reflect on the year behind us, on the traditions we carry over, and the ones we're ready to create. I love that traditions can be rewritten, that you get to choose which ones to keep and which ones to let go. One tradition worth creating is making space for yourself, especially when life feels full. Therapy can be that space, a place to untangle your thoughts, to process what you're feeling, to close the year with clarity instead of chaos. BetterHelp makes finding that support a little easier. With over 30,000 licensed therapists and more than 5 million people helped, it's one of the largest online therapy platforms in the world. And if you aren't happy with your match, you can switch to a different therapist at any time from their tailored recs. This December, start a new tradition by taking care of you. Our listeners get 10% off at betterhelp.com/TLL. That's betterhelp.com/TLL. It's amazing to think how new so much of this knowledge is in this world of psychiatry, mental health. But I think this is how the information spreads. Literally, people like you who are doing the work and sharing it with people. So why don't we go into what you know? I guess, what are the most important things that you wish everybody knew? And start with the basics, as if no one's ever known anything about what nutrients they need.
Okay. Well, I think first I'd peel back with this idea that you have of like, well, we don't think about the things that are really preventative and proactive in our life related to our brain health. And so nutrition and nutritional psychiatry, which is really thinking about what foods optimize your brain health. And then if you're thinking about mental health like I do, at the end of the day, I treat folks who are struggling often with depression, anxiety, a lot of trauma, a lot of substance use, bipolar disorder. So, how can we treat and prevent mental health concerns, whether those are symptoms or diagnosable mental health conditions? And for me, this is all part of mental fitness, which is how can we really bring the weight of new science to mental health and psychiatric recommendations. I'm a big fan of a lot of the medicines we have. They're very handy in the right hands, particularly well-trained folks are good at medicine. Well-trained folks are amazing at psychotherapy. There's also all this stuff we need to do. And so just when we pull back from nutritional psychiatry, what's it a part of? It's part of this notion of mental fitness. Everybody listening knows about their physical fitness. We all know how to work our core. We've all been to a Pilates class. Eileen, I'm going to bar class now. I'm going to be honest with this
amazing.
Group. Yeah, it is amazing. It's really good. It's really good for my balance. It's really good for, being in just like a different setting. It's a little uncomfortable sometimes as the music's pumping and I'm next, I'm not the most graceful person sometimes, but anyway, we all have physical fitness plans. We all have exercises we do. We all have ways that even if you're not doing it, right? Everybody quickly could think of a quick regimen that would maybe make their week feel a little better from a movement perspective. We don't have the same thing for our mental health, right? We don't have a mental fitness plan. Sometimes we do. We all know folks who are really good at it, like the people who are connectors, who are always planning stuff. That's a mental fitness attribute. The folks who have good boundaries and good self-awareness, that's an attribute of mental fitness. And so nutrition, and we'll talk about the food categories for sure that are important, but just for me, it's in this plan of hey, I want you to have these tenets of mental fitness in your life. I want you to be thinking about a framework for you. It's very specific for everybody listening. And so the first tenet starts with self-awareness. And so we apply that to nutrition of are you a super wellness foodie, organic, know everything that I've already said and I'm going to say about nutrition? A lot of you listening do. And having that self-awareness that for you, maybe it's much more about diversifying and making sure it's not just, leafy greens. It's you're tired of kale and you got to get more bok choy and more arugula in your life. Maybe it's more about including people and using your nutrition knowledge to think about some of these other tenets like connection. But that first step is self-awareness. And that's such a, I think, overlooked piece of mental fitness where it's where we have a lot of the FOMO and the comparison and the rise of social media is really having a hard time just with the self. Or I see it in my practice now where people are consulting my new co-therapist, ChatGPT and Dr. Claude. Mm-hmm. And it's been interesting. I'm an heir of Dr. Google showed up and he's actually very interesting, very good. I welcome him to the practice. These new players, I don't know, it's interesting, but one of the effects I see with a lot of people is the way that it kind of removes the sense of voice and authority over the self. You know yourself. You're clear on your opinion. You have self-awareness. If you're a journaler, you know a lot about self-awareness. There's a lot of data showing journaling and just kind of putting words to our feelings. Huge benefits, helping our mental health. That's where we kind of begin. And then again, this idea of then moving into the second tenet of nutrition. When we think about what are the foods, it's like first to sort of say like, well, how do we rank a food for brain health? And Eileen, I want to hear a couple of your favorite brain foods because I don't want to just drone on here. And then we'll think about whether they're good brain foods or not. But what are maybe some of your favorite foods? And then we'll maybe talk about them. And everybody, I want you to think about some of your brain foods and then let's kind of think about if they end up in some of the categories we talk about.
Yeah. Well, when you say brain foods, I first thought of walnuts because I've heard that walnuts are good for your brain. And I think of healthy fats, whether it's like fish or nuts and olive oil, I guess. That's as much as I really know. In general, I understand that whole organic, like whole foods are best and unprocessed.
Yep. Those are some of the really key pieces, actually. So let's talk about some of those foods, but let's just talk about this idea first of processed versus unprocessed food. So there's a recent study looking at thousands of nurses and looking at their risk of getting depressed over years and years. It was the Nurses' Health Study 2. They looked at how much processed food the nurses ate. And they found that the nurses who ate the most processed food, the top 20%, they had a 60% increased risk of clinical depression compared to those who ate a more whole foods diet. And so you see that the kind of one, in some ways, brain food or eating in a nutritional psychiatry plan for a lot of people is straightforward. Of the self-awareness piece and the dietary assessment is like seeing where the processed foods and ultra-processed foods are slipping into your diet. And that's easy to do. Think about the packages you're opening. Think about the ingredients list. Think about the fast food. Think about commercial baked goods. So eating more commercial baked goods can up to double your risk of clinical depression. And so let's get in a couple of foods you talked about, like nuts and walnuts in particular. So walnuts have a lot of the land or plant-based omega-3 fat, ALA. It's 18 carbons long. You'll see I often recommend what are called long-chain omega-3 fats. Those are the 22 and 24 carbon long.
What are other examples of those?
Yeah, so those EPA and DHA, so eicosapentaenoic acid and docosahexaenoic acid. So those are the longest chained fats that we eat. And they are the omega-3 fats that are most important for the brain. EPA is really shown in the data to be, in terms of mood and clinical depression, probably the most important fat. DHA is a more structural fat. We actually use it to make brain cells. About 7% of the dry weight of your brain is DHA. Now, if you're a vegan or vegetarian, you never eat seafood, you still have a brain and lots of brain cells. Where does that DHA come from? Well, you make it. And so some people argue, you can make plenty. And if you eat more of the plant-based, more chia seeds, more walnuts, and more flax plants, because that's really where ALA comes from, you're going to make more EPA and DHA. For a lot of patients struggling with mood, anxiety, challenges, if you don't eat seafood or fish for whatever reason, it's a great thing to think about long-chain omega-3 fats. But again, with walnuts, there are other things going on. You said fats, and it's so important. So 60% of your brain is fat. Wow. And there are certain fats that you eat that seem to be linked to, having more preserved mental function, decreased risk of depression. Those are mainly, as you said, the olive oil, which are monounsaturated fats, the fatty fish. And I really remind people like tinned fish, like sardines and anchovies are really fun go-to, because a lot of times you just get in that wild salmon rut. It's kind of like our go-to weekly fish for a lot of people, and great one, really lovely one. But mixing it up is really important. So for some people, it's surprising to hear a doctor recommend clams, but clams are your top source of B12. You don't have to eat a lot. If you eat 3 ounces of clams, you get 1,400% of your recommended daily allowance of B12. So there's just these kind of almost like really concentrated brain foods.
Because there's so much like seafood that's good for our brain, are you concerned about mercury levels?
Well, I think that it's important to think about contaminants in food, whether it's in our dark chocolate or whether it's in contaminated vegetables or whether I recommend a lot of leafy greens. Leafy greens are also the top source of food poisoning. And so I think it's really important to think about things like contaminant and mercury and what's myth, like what's misinformation, right? Like you'll hear people say kale's toxic, that's misinformation, or it's filled with oxalates. Kale's actually a low oxalate green. That's when you need to go on a low oxalate diet. They put you on greens as an example of how like twisted the information is these days.
Yeah.
But mercury in fish we all accumulate mercury, and you accumulate mercury in the environment. If you have a lot of exposure, if you're, for example, I worked with individuals who eat tons and tons of sushi who've had mercury levels. I've worked with people who are in the medical field, who are like in the medical device industry, who are around more of these chemicals. And so when we think about mercury, and I'd also put in there microplastics, and I'd also think about what we call persistent organic pollutants. These are three things that we find in the fats of animals that we eat. And so one easy, quick move is eating things that are smaller with shorter lives. And maybe that sounds gross, but that's just true. Like eating a younger, smaller fish, or like a mussel, which is just around for a few months before harvested, it's going to accumulate less bad stuff. When you look at where the big sources of mercury are with sea fish, they're in these big, like swordfish, for example, right? So they're around for a long time.
Like tuna as well, right?
Some of the tuna, some are okay. Some have a lot more mercury because they're bigger fish. They're predators. They're at the top of the food chain. And so the mercury is bioconcentrating. I think it's also important for people to realize your body's pretty good at getting rid of mercury. And so you want to make sure and not avoid some of these nutritional sources, but also be aware of what they are. It's like with dark chocolate. Some brands are better than others, but there certainly was a scare with cadmium and lead, two other heavy metals. There was a bunch of headlines about kale and thallium. So if your greens are grown next to a concrete factory, they're going to have more things like thallium in them. And so this is, again, where it's just important to think about some of these things like leafy greens, like our seafood, like are there good sources? Like you can't eat fish that comes from an American river or lake anymore without really getting significant contaminants, whether it's what are called PCBs, persistent, or POPs, persistent organic pollutants, right? This can be like things like dioxin or PCBs. So this is again, can sound like a real downer. There's all kinds of like scary things, but mostly where I avoid this is younger, smaller fish. So anchovies and sardines, wild salmon, eating these things regularly to have natural stores of omega-3 fats in my dietary plan or natural sources, mixing it in with, I have these food categories, little rhymes, seafood, greens, nuts and beans, and a little dark chocolate.
Okay.
And then I've added recently rainbow celebrations. Don't forget the fermentations.
Oh, I love that.
And this is just when you're thinking about your week, or I do this when I'm feeling like a little mopey or a little anxious, where along with all of my fancy psychiatry skills and deep breathing, my box breathing, my exercise, my sauna, I also just go to quickly. Like before this, I was just feeling a little unsettled and realized, been working all day. I haven't had enough water. And so first thing I did, I had 2 big glasses of water. I just sat there, let it settle for a second. I realized a few hours ago, I've got this interview. I don't want to be low blood sugar. So I have walnuts are on my mind. I bought a big bag of them a couple of weeks ago just because I hadn't had them. Also, seafood, greens, nuts, and beans. We talked about seafood, lots of nutrients, lots of B vitamins, B12, great source of iodine, great source, really the only source of long-chain omega-3 fats. I like rainbow trout a lot as a great option. I like canned clams, make pasta vongole, have mussels at home. It's a great date night. Greens, just diversity. Dark leafy greens are great. Collard greens are great. Saute them in garlic. I think one of my recommendations, actually, I just have a post up on Instagram about how to eat leafy greens, and just reminding people, hey, it's more than salads, right? If chopping up salads, especially I live in Wyoming, we're headed towards the winter. It's going to be -20. I want warm stuff. I want sauteed greens. I want soups and stews with greens. Well, greens go great in those. Actually, I make this egg pie dish called kuku sabzi. It has 11 cups of herbs and greens. And it makes this amazing kind of green herby pie, eggy pie thing. It's amazing. Really delicious. Great for breakfast. Great for lunch. Great as a little side. And again, so much nutrition. So those are the greens. And then nuts and beans. Just talking about walnuts, almonds, cashews. I love nuts because it's a great snack. People are like, oh, so many calories. It's right. That's why you eat them slowly, you chew them, and then they fill you up. When you travel a lot for work, a lot of you travel for work. I always have a little bag of nuts with me, raw unsalted nuts. I like cashews. If you kind of are off the processed food, cashews taste very sweet. Like often I'll like check and make sure I didn't get the like candied cashews just because there's a real sweetness to them. There's also, for all the women listening, a lot of iron in cashews. So as we're looking for plant-based sources of iron and just more iron in your diet, right, it's probably one of the most common nutritional deficiencies that you're up against. Cashews are great. And so raw unsalted nuts, this nice mix of protein, monounsaturated fat. I tell my patients it's like a little packet of olive oil. Carry it with you. It's not going to get on your clothes, right? And very satiating because this mix of fat, protein, and fiber, and that's what signals to our body that we're full. So, nuts are great snacks, great to drop in your salads, great, again, to increase the satiation. And the USDA issued a statement years ago that you only absorb about 25%. The calorie count is about 25% less than what's on the package. You don't absorb all the calories in nuts. And then just because beans and seeds, just great. Chia seeds, flax seeds, but also I really love beans. There's a lot of misinformation about lectins right now. You don't have any lectins in cooked beans and cooked lentils, and particularly a big fan of lentils. Just lots of vitamin B9 folate, 18 grams of protein in a cup, 68% of your daily need of fiber in a cup. Like I think it's like a third of your iron. So just like, wow, right? Like that's incredible nutrition. So that's when we talk about like nutrient density. That's where things like lentils or clams, right? These are like real superstars, at least in all of my work and all my books, you sort of see stand out.
Let's take another break for today's sponsor, Shopify. It's been almost a decade since I created the first Artist of Life workbook. We started small, packing and shipping everything ourselves, and I watched it grow into something so much bigger, something that's become a meaningful ritual for so many of you each year. If there's something inside you waiting to be created, whether it's a product, a shop, or a business, 2026 is the year to let it out. The year you finally become the entrepreneur, the founder, the creator you've been dreaming of becoming. That's exactly what Shopify helped me do. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world. It gives you everything you need to sell online and in person. You can build your dream store with hundreds of beautiful templates, all customizable to match your brand. Their AI tools handle the details, writing product descriptions and headlines and editing your photos. Marketing is built in so you can create email and social campaigns that reach customers wherever they scroll. And as you grow, Shopify grows with you. More orders, new markets, all from one dashboard. In 2026, stop waiting and start selling with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/TLL. Go to shopify.com/TLL. That's shopify.com/TLL. Hear your first this new year with Shopify by your side. So when you're building a meal, do you think about, I need these elements and what percentage of these elements? Like if you could give people kind of a template to think about when they're planning their future meals for this nutrition.
Yeah, for sure. There are a few ways that I rate my meals. First I'm thinking around right now as we're in like a protein craze. I do think about the protein. I'm a middle-aged man. And so I'm up against sarcopenia, meaning that I'm trying to keep my muscle mass okay. Yeah. Not just for the Instagram, but just for my health, right? That's a way I'm going to keep, my insulin resistance in check. Also just a way that I'm going to keep my balance and my strength and all that stuff. For me, I'm rotating through sources of protein. We've talked about some like wild salmon. I'm a fan of grass-fed beef, bison out here, and elk out here. I'm a big fan of like wild game meats in terms of very lean meats, really interesting. I think a lot of people get wrapped around the axle talking about meat and the health effects of meat, but there is a way that for a lot of people, going to your annual doctor visit, checking your lipids, managing your heart disease risk is just, thinking about the types of meat you eat is a part of that conversation. But a lot of people, especially these days, make it this kind of binary thing, like that's all you need to do. And as a physician, I found it to be it's really important to remind people that, as we learned with wine, right, that there are no heart benefits of wine. And I practiced for a lot of my career where everybody would chuckle and talk about their couple glasses of red wine, how it's great for their heart and their brain health. And it never seemed true to me.
Okay, there's no benefit? I didn't know this.
There's really no benefit,
I
and I think it's one
see.
of those things. People have a really complicated relationship with alcohol. I certainly did. I drank for a long time. I love drinking. I've been drinking for about just over 4 years now. But it's one of those ways that, we need to be cautious when we use science to feed our habits. And so, it's easy to say that red wine is really good for your health and then drink half a bottle a night. And I think especially in urban areas, especially when you're working, especially when you've got it dialed in. I had it in my kind of hydration and reward circuit. I'd never drink during the day. I never had a quote unquote problem, but boy, 5 o'clock, I was ready to have a drink. And then you get red wine and say, oh, it's healthy, calming down. It's like the Mediterranean diet. Meanwhile, you're not actually eating any of the other stuff on the Mediterranean diet. You're not just having one glass. I think drinking is just a real challenge. It's not good for your body. It's a neurotoxin. It's fascinating right now. We're in a little moment where for the first time, really, since I've been alive, people are drinking less. And already you're starting to hear the backlash. Right, about people. I've already seen some influence. Oh, this generation's not partying enough. They're not drinking enough. It's like already the peer pressure starts. And I think it's fascinating. It's like, is everybody really that freaking insecure that we can't be ourselves? We can't go dancing. We can't go start a conversation. We can't relax unless we drink.
I totally agree with you because I don't really like drinking either. So going back to the template of building your meal. So you start with your protein, and ideally it's like a lean protein.
Yeah. And maybe we say if we're starting, I would say probably let's start with your plants, right?
Okay, so you start with the plants.
I'd like to just, because that's the one that people struggle with. About 95% of Americans don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. Again, not this audience. Thanks, Eileen, also for bringing us back. I really appreciate that.
It's okay.
I think the first thing I ask most eaters is what do you like? What do you feel like? I really like pasta. And so then I get into that question of how do I improve it? Right. I add in more seafood. I add in more greens. Oh, suddenly I've got an anchovy and pesto and wow, I've got a lot of nutrition in there. So, I usually will start with some plants or things that I'm hankering for. I usually am also thinking time of day. I'm going to be a sparse eater in the middle of the day. I really am doing my very best to be awake for my 3 and 4 o'clock patients. They deserve a beautifully attentive person, just like everyone else. So I want to really be cautious about not eating high glycemic index foods, not eating processed foods. This is a great place where you'll see more nuts kind of in the middle of the day or more kind of simple like fats and proteins. I love a salmon jerky. I love a nice salmon and greens would be a perfect salad for a lunch for me, where you again, another way I assess the plate is see the rainbow. When I said rainbow celebrations, don't forget the fermentations. If you look at your plate and you see 3 or 4 colors of vegetables, you see a little fermented food. I have a lovely twofer for this. I bought a nice jar of purple sauerkraut.
Yeah.
There we go. I got a color and a fermented food. So anytime I'm doing a rice bowl or a quinoa bowl or a bean bowl or a salad, or even something I just did, we had a steak and potato night and there's a little bowl of sauerkraut. Suddenly everybody had fermented foods at the table. It was really, it made it a nice little flavor to profile for a few bites.
And real quick about the nutrition, I understand fermentation is good for our gut. And is that why it's good for our brain, or is there more science behind this?
The way that it's good for our brain is through our gut. A couple of things about that. So fermented foods, when you hear about the microbiome, these are all the organisms that live in our gut. Just really quickly, everybody, if you're watching the video version of this and you just look at me here, right? What makes Drew Ramsey and Eileen, each of us, is only 27,000 genes. That's it. 27 and 3 zeros. That's all the parts that it takes to make a human. Those are all the proteins you need. Wild, right? It's I feel like my minivan has more parts. I was a little disappointed. That's it. So if you think about our gut, our colon right here, just put your hand on your gut. You're right underneath your hands. You have 12.6 million genes in the bacteria in your colon. When you just think about the amount of genetic diversity, when we're talking about genetic diversity, every gene or a lot of genes have a function, right? So some genes make vitamin K2. So you don't have a gene that makes vitamin K2 or vitamin B12 in your genome, but the organisms in your gut do.
Wow.
So when we're thinking about gut health and the microbiome, I just like to remind people you're taking care of this library of genes. And you want to have diversity in your microbiome. There's ways of measuring that. But generally, the studies say the way of promoting a healthier microbiome is regularly eating fermented foods and regularly eating a diverse set of plants. So it's not just broccoli every night. It would be better to eat broccoli once a week. And the other nights have cauliflower, carrots, potatoes, sweet potatoes, celery, arugula, microgreens, walnuts, almonds. All right, we're talking about a lot of different plants. Why? The microbiome bacteria, they feed on fiber. So you and your human digestion, you slurp up all the carbohydrates and protein and a lot of the fats. And then what ends up in your gut and your colon are the fibers that you can't digest. And so about 20% of the calories of food gets extracted by the microbiome. It's also wild. I didn't know this. I learned this, maybe 10 years ago as I was studying more about nutritional psychiatry and just keeping up to date on the science of inflammation. The largest part of your inflammatory system is your gut. And the key to regulating your inflammatory system is your microbiome. So if you have a microbiome that is sending calming signals to your vagus nerve, you're going to have much better mental health. You're going to have better concentration. There's actually studies, you have better concentration, better mood resilience, better stress reactions, all that stuff. And so it's kind of wild to think, if you kind of dial it all back, what is nutritional psychiatry? What is mental fitness? It's saying, hey, I think you should put kefir in your smoothies. And if you want the deep science behind that, it's because kefir has more colony forming units and it's a more concentrated probiotic than anything else in the world. It's easy and delicious to put a little bit in a smoothie. It's a great way to have your kids get more fermented foods. Doing that leads to a more diverse microbiome, leading to a better regulation of your inflammatory system. And that's both like theoretical, but also kind of bears out in the evidence as you look at a lot of the studies around this. And so whether it's kefir or kombucha or yogurt or natto or miso or sauerkraut, again, more diversity in plants, more diversity in fermented foods. That's how you take care of your microbiome.
I love that. And it makes so much sense because I think some people think about, I'm eating healthy foods for my brain because my brain needs it. But no, like your gut it is so important to feed that microbiome because it affects your brain. Can you give us some more hacks like that, right? Like little easy things that we can sprinkle into our meals, our smoothies, our soups that would make a big difference. Like, for example, like chia seeds in your smoothies or things like that.
I'll say chia pudding. That's my favorite hack. I like chia pudding.
I love chia too. I just make
chia pudding. I like it with just regular milk because I do like a lactose-free milk because I like dairy. Some people don't. They use other alternative milks, waters. You just put I put like flavor profiles I like. I put some nuts in there. I put dates in there, which I like to sweeten it with. Other people like just a little cinnamon, but you just get this yummy, viscous, fibery, delicious, more start to your morning. It's kind of a higher fiber version of oatmeal. But in terms of like hacks, just some of the foods that I like eggs. We eat a lot of eggs in my house. For the choline is a B vitamin or B-like vitamin. It's the cousin of folate. We never talk about it. 90% of Americans don't meet the recommended daily allowance of it. 2 eggs. For women, you get 70% of your daily need of choline. Choline is what we use to make acetylcholine. That's a major neurotransmitter for learning. There's a lot involved with kind of emotional regulation in acetylcholine. So 1 egg is about 70 calories. So again, really nutrient dense. I love the fermented foods and having a variety in my fridge. So just open your fridge right now after this, everybody, because I don't know, I always feel like I really want to change how you eat so you take care of your mental health. So just look in there. How many fermented foods if you see none, that's like amazing. It's like incredible. Seriously, it's like incredible opportunity for you.
Yeah.
Like right now at the grocery store, you can go get some kefir, yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, right? Most of my books have recipes. The most recent one doesn't, but it's a great kimchi fried rice. So again, there's stuff that you can do right away. So the fermented food, I think, is a good one. Raw, unsalted nuts, tinned fish we talked about. Pesto, huge hack.
Is pesto because of the olive oil and it's like nuts and the leaf. And okay, I see.
You're like a good nutritional psychiatrist, Eileen. See that?
Makes sense. I see it. It's like everything you talked about in one.
See how pesto's like genius, where it's like, oh my gosh, it's like little garlic in there. I love making pesto, everybody. Someone just posted on my Instagram about carrot top pesto.
Oh, yeah. You can get really creative.
I want to do a pesto that's radicchio pistachio just because I like the way
Okay.
it sounds. You
Yeah.
can do a pesto out of any type of leafy green or like a
I
radicchio,
didn't think
a
about that.
nut,
Yeah.
any nut, olive oil, garlic. It makes all kinds of crazy fun profiles. But it's also fun just to get them. I don't have any affiliation. I just really like there's this Gotham greens, these little packages of spicy pesto. And
Mm.
so I'll take that. Like, for example, maybe I have a little leftover salmon. And with a little bit of refrigerated pasta, so now I have what's called a resistant starch, which is really good for your microbiome, doesn't spike your blood sugar as much. And see how with literally just assembling, got this amazing pesto salmon pasta salad, right? If it's not a salady enough, I can take a handful of microgreens or arugula, drop it on there, right? If it's a little winter month, I can wilt those greens, have a little side of greens and heat that pasta up. And with a little pesto and a little salmon, it's like, I don't know, it's an
Yeah.
amazing meal in my mind. I'm getting all my
Yeah.
brain foods. So when you're saying like, how do I construct it? Sometimes out of little leftovers. Usually for me, the challenge is getting in the seafood and getting in the regular vegetables. Those are some of the ideas around, I think, construction and how to put a plate together, but also just thinking about nutritional psychiatry and how to feed your mental health. I'm trying to think of other good hacks. There's a few more. Hummus, I think, is a really nice hack. White beans on the pasta. So if your pasta is like you just got pasta with red sauce, like, okay, first of all, you can swap that out for pesto some nights. Another thing, you
Uh-huh.
drop in some little white beans. White beans are the
Yeah.
top food for potassium. One of my other hacks, I think, is potatoes and small potatoes. So, we think about potato like, oh, big Idaho potato or French fries or potato chips. Like, that's like what Americans did with potatoes. Not so good. You should think little tiny potatoes, like purple sweet potatoes, right? Because the smaller the potato, the more skin, the less starch, just the more phytonutrients.
Skin is better for us. So smaller is
I feel
better.
as I've gotten older, it's creepier when I say like more skin is better, but yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's something I didn't realize.
And the reason, again, the skin is where the phytonutrients are. A lot of phytonutrients are the plant's molecules where it protects itself. And so when you think about a little baby potato, right, think about all the little skin and a little tiny middle of starch, yum, right? But if are looking at a forkful of that, it's a lot of skin versus like an Idaho potato where it's
Right.
just all starch. So I love a big baked potato. That's fine. But again, in diversity, I find just a lot of people are like, oh, potatoes are yucky or they're fattening or they're too many carbs. And it's like, if you put any of these starches in the refrigerator and heat them back up, they now are resistant starch. That's your bread, your pasta, your
Oh,
potatoes. So
I
I'll
see.
do like for, like a batch cook. And a lot of times, because I work from home, I'll either skip lunch or, I'll go quickly snack something not as healthy, like, I don't know, a package of salami, or I'll eat some crackers and hummus way too quickly, or I'll chew an apple really fat, right? Horrible. Not horrible, but just not ideal. It's much better for me to go and pull out some oven roasted potatoes. And again, chop them up, maybe chop them up with a hard boiled egg, maybe a little celery, maybe, there's a way that you just kind of start to construct something that's plants and proteins, really simple, really inexpensive, really good for me. So those are some of my favorite foods. Starting the kids out on the mango lassi, the kefir with mango, I think is really fun. Nuts in my smoothies, that's another big hack. Always drop in a handful of like cashews is probably my favorite. I find that for me is the best mouthfeel. Just makes this yummy kind of little more of a like fatty mouthfeel, but just in a good way. So
Thanks for sharing all of those. I hope our listeners are taking notes. Okay, so going back to your concept of mental fitness, is there anything else that is really important that you want to share?
there are a couple of the other tenets just to kind of walk everyone through them, and quickly we can highlight a couple maybe that you feel resonate most with you. But, I would say, as we move from nutrition, I moved to movement, and I call it that instead of exercise. I tell the story of a patient who I've been recommending exercise forever for her chronic depression, and she came in glowing, just glowing one session, and she'd taken up dancing again. She'd been a tango dancer. She loved taking dance classes. I had
Yeah.
no idea. I'd never asked her that. When you look in the data actually and look at different types of exercise and movement, dance classes outperform pretty much everything else. And to me, it's just a great example of, again, when we think about evidence-based recommendations, your therapist, your psychiatrist, we're not saying like, hey, go dancing. Eileen, when was the last time you went dancing? And I think especially as we age, a lot of especially guys, like the last time you went dancing was last wedding you went to and drank too much, right? And so we really want to change that, like encourage people to get their groove on, especially moving into some of the other tenets, right? So after movement, move into sleep. And I talk about the glymphatic system and really ask people like, stop saying sleep hygiene and saying 8 hours of sleep. None of us have good sleep hygiene and none of you sleep 8 hours a night. I've become like a little bit of like sleep boot camp because I started monitoring my sleep. I started listening to myself as a clinician where people be like, oh, I try doc 7-8 hours. I'd be like, oh, good job. Sleep hygiene. They'd be like, yeah, no, I try. And like that's not an assessment. An assessment is like, tell me about your bedroom. Tell me about the air quality. Do you have blackout curtains? Okay, well, if not, tell me about how much, is it totally dark? No? Oh, you get interrupted by noise. Do you have a white noise machine or noise cancellation? All kinds of ways that in different situations, if you're in a dorm room with a snoring roommate, or if you live above a restaurant and they empty the trash every night at 1, right? There's all kinds of different challenges people have to their sleep. So I get into that a lot and the tenet of sleep. We then think about the tenet of connection. And this is, when you ask like, what's the most important? I would say if there's something I'd love you all to eat well and go tango dancing. But if there's one thing right now, I am sure will be good value of time spent on your mental fitness, it's working on your connections. And I ask people in the book to think about a web of connection where this isn't just friends and family. Like those certainly are some of the most vibrant, but we get a lot of mental fitness and mental health from the institutions. For some people, I tell the story of a guy who he builds community around a sports team. I'm not the biggest sports fan, but I loved watching Ronnie reconnect and have connections. And it's amazing when you see it on the couch. People, even in the midst of the worst depression, when they feel a human connection, they smile. It's just so clear. And there's one of the reasons I call them tenets is in this era of polarization, I wanted a set of things we all agree on. No one's going to disagree with me that connecting with friends, family, connecting with nature, great for you. After that, it's the tenet of engagement, which is really about how to fight the algorithm. Part of what's happening with the kind of dysphoria that a lot of people are feeling, that kind of like that existential angst or that shift sea change that's happening right now, is that you're not making decisions. None of us are anymore. The algorithm is, right? What I see for my hours on social media is determined by AI and the algorithm now. And so engagement is really asking you to like put down the phone and almost like detox from not having to choose and starting to choose. What would you choose? It's where like going to a restaurant's still nice. Like you've got to order yourself. What do you like? What are other people ordering? There's a way that engagement is really asking people to build their cognitive reserve and to build their choice back into their life to fight the algorithm. After this, we think about grounding, which is going out in big nature. I talk about moving from Manhattan to really rural Indiana and living on my family farm during COVID with my kids and my wife and my parents. And then moving out here to really like very big nature. I'm a mile up in the mountains, right by Grand Teton, right by the Yellowstone and the National Elk Refuge. So grounding has been very important to me. In each of these chapters, or at least tenets, I get into the science. So like grounding is important. We all love nature, but until I started researching this book, I didn't know about phytocides. They're these molecules that trees make that we breathe in that actually lowers our inflammation.
Wow.
And so there's all this cool science about, again, how our mental fitness is influenced by things like grounding, going out in nature. Yeah. And then the last two tenets, maybe one that's really important, Eileen, for your audience, the eighth tenet is unburdening. And unburdening is really asking people to think and expand their notion of trauma. I find a lot of time there's kind of, people think about trauma as incident trauma, right? An assault or a robbery or an accident or an injury. And those certainly are important traumas, but there are also other types of trauma. And certainly I'm not trying to make everyone into a trauma victim. It's just that, if you had significant disagreements with a sibling, or you had a dad who drank too much, never was horrible, just was literally absent, or you had an 8th grade teacher that was mean to you or talked to you about your body in disparaging ways, or flirted with you, really uncomfortable, right? All these types of things live inside people in powerful ways. And unburdening is really asking folks to step into their present by addressing those. So that's unburdening, and not to trivialize trauma. There are all kinds of ways to deal with it. I talk about some of the journaling work. I talk about getting into groups. I talk about treatment. The last tenet's purpose. A life lived with purpose. The morning when we wake up feeling a sense of purpose. I mean, nothing gets in our way. Humans with purpose, it's incredible. We all admire and look towards and to people who have a sense of purpose. We experience them as being thoughtful, deep, considerate. I think we all strive to have a sense of purpose. At the root of a lot of people feeling badly is feeling that they don't belong to something, that they're not working towards something, that their day-to-day, minute-to-minute efforts don't aggregate and lead to something. And so that's our sense of purpose. I wanted this to be a part of the book because I think, again, a lot of people are getting, just like nutrition, a lot of distraction and at times just frank information. Like I hear about a lot of young people who are told to like find their passion. I don't know. That's not good advice. People have no idea what their passion is. Passions burn very hot. I talk about this in the book, that instead, I really encourage people to think about processes they like. Like I had no idea how riding a horse was tied to my purpose until much later in life. But I knew the process, getting on that horse, grooming the horse, actually caring for it. It like took me into some process that was kind of like nothing else. And so when there are processes that you find yourself drawn to, I wasn't a big journaler until, I don't know, a couple of years before this book. I went through some very strange things with my family. I just found that writing it down just grounded me, centered me, So a big part of my unburdening has been journaling. So getting a sense of purpose, I think is a wonderful thing for us to aspire to. It's the last tenet, because I also think you got to, kind of got to get your house in order before you ask yourself that question. It's probably one of my other objections of people really burdening young folks with their sense of passion. It's like these young folks are getting dialed in. They're getting a sense of connection. They're getting their nutrition plan. They're understanding how to like live in and move their adult bodies. Like their sense of purpose is something that they're exploring.
My next question is kind of out of those tenets, like what are, I guess, the habits or activities that you do or that you recommend to your clients to really integrate these tenets into your life? For example, grounding. Like what are examples of,
I think it's important for us to keep it simple. Sometimes I find myself ready for a bike ride, and the getting ready takes longer than the bike ride. I think that you work on are also a little different in different phases of your life. I think it's always important to work on connection, but I moved to Jackson, Wyoming 4 years ago. And so my wife and I have been really intent about having to put in extra effort, having to send, some more texts, having to put ourselves out there a little bit, having to be in that uncomfortable spot of just not knowing people and having to go up and say hi, having to model for our kids. This is how you build a community. This is how we're trying to. So connection, I find, really pays off. I find particularly when you're in a state struggling with your mental health, connections are very protective for us. You don't have to call someone and say, oh, wow, I'm really depressed. I relapsed. I think I'm going to lose my job and I can't sleep. You can call them up and say like, hey, Dave, how you doing, man? I've been missing talking to you and just been, been a little challenging recently. How have you been? And actually one of the best things is if your friend says, I've been having a hard time, man. And suddenly you're in a little group process, sharing with another human being. You're not alone with your struggles. So I really love connection. I'm obviously a little biased. I'm a therapist. And so I'm always looking to really build a very deep sense of connection and alliance with my patients. I run very intensive treatments. I work with very complex individuals with often very complex problems. And so, having alliance is in that, and having a sense of connection is fundamental to my work. You're not going to trust people with your deepest, hardest secrets unless you really have a sense of connection with them. So that one's really important to me. Grounding is huge, whether it's I'm a farm boy or for a lot of my life when I was living in this urban New York City, all kinds of weird things like the farmer's market became my favorite place because I go back and I'm sure the farmers thought I was weird. I just thought like, because I'm from a farm and they're farmers and they're on a farm, it's like, we're connected. I felt very friendly. I'd go talk to people and all the farmers. I'd thank them. I think, generally they got a kick out of me, but I find the nature and the grounding for me, especially now in my 50s, where I'm sitting with myself a little bit more, where a lot of that ambition and those plans that you're working hard on and grinding, they've either fallen by the wayside or failed, or, hopefully a few of them come to fruition and you're sitting with that. And so nature is a really wonderful place to work on those skills. There's a way that nature pulls us into mindfulness. I went, like the people here in Jackson are really ambitious. And one of my son's best friends has this like incredible set of parents. Like the dad's like been to like the kayak Olympic trials, and the mom's like every time it's like he's coming back for some like ultra marathon, but they're also just like normal, lovely, healthy folks. And so for their kid's birthday, they do a float. So I ended up doing it's like 26 miles stand-up paddle boarding.
Oh, wow.
And this is kind of normal
That's
for
long.
these people. Yeah, for me, I was like,
That's crazy.
it's like, see you all next time. I was like, wow. But it
Wow.
was, the reason I bring it up is like to be in nature like that, there is a mindfulness, right? Watching the bottom of the river, stopping and just like seeing how fast everything was going by,
Yeah.
being in a canyon, seeing all the different, little fish. I mean, we went by a moose and a baby moose. So, for me, really working that tenet. And I think I encourage people to have a plan around it. My tenet of grinding used to be Central Park and spending my weekends in Vermont. And so there's, for everyone, it's different. Maybe, for you, it's like your outdoor space. And, some of the not strange, but some of my creative solutions is I've always had a lot of plants, as you can see behind me here. I like having a lot of plants. I like tending to them and caring for them. So it doesn't have to be a big national park or Central Park or, some epic landscaping project. It can be very simple. I think the best parts of mental fitness are simple. So those are the ones that speak to me right now. I'd say, we've talked about nutrition, really thinking about your connections and that web of connection, not just friends and family. Where are the places that you're connected to? What are the books you feel most connected to? What are some of the values and mentors and inspiring figures you feel most connected to? Like I was studying for this big exam the other day, and I read about Karen Horney, who I'd forgotten about. She's a early psychoanalyst and psychiatrist who is really at the forefront of kind of adding feminist thought into psychodynamic and psychoanalytic thinking. I don't know much about Dr. Horney, but I really want to learn more about her work. And, she's one of these people in the back of my mind. It's just kind of like inspiring, I think. And there's like, I don't know, like I want to be more connected to what she thinks about. I want to try and carry some of that forward in my work. So that's an example, right? In a quiet moment, maybe in a sad moment, I kind of have this like, besides Instagram, right? I kind of have a few things that intrigue me that I want to go get into and learn about and connect with. So again, those are some tenets I hope help.
I love it. And you know what I'm hearing about all of these tenets is that all of these are things that you should be doing outside of social media, outside of technology, right? Like the connection, the grounding, the making your own choices. I think too many of us spend too much time with our brains just like on autopilot, scrolling and consuming, that we forget the things that make our mental health and our brain feel good are happening outside of that. Is the human connection, the going outside.
Yeah, I think it's confusing. I have to say, like you, I bet, and like a lot of people listening, some of my connections online, even some of my social media connections, are really positive.
Yeah.
When I look through my stories and I connect with a podcaster like you, and then you see I'm seeing your stories, and you see, I see you're watching there's a way that after you see that over months, you have a sense of some of these folks kind of knowing something about you. Not everything, right? But in some ways, a lot more than people have ever known. And so, while we talk about the negatives of social media and the comparison and all that, there's also, for a lot of us, there's a way that it's an act of expression. It's a way of connecting with folks that I never would get to connect with. It's a way of sharing. I find it a little bit like journaling, like I'm forced to reflect on my state, my message, my values every day. And so I like that, but you're also right. Healing the modern brain. What's the modern brain? The modern brain are these amazing neurons we have, and they're dropped in a bunch of weird food, a bunch of microplastics and mercury. They're underslept, they don't move. All the waste is building up in them. What do we say? There's a teaspoon of microplastics in the brain right now for the average person.
Terrifying.
Like we don't go outside. 80% of new jobs are sedentary. We doom scroll with abandon. we're drunk and high. No offense to anybody, but just there's a lot of alcohol consumption. There's a lot of substance. I'm going to call it exploration. There have never been so many middle-aged people and boomers that I've ever seen in my career who were Delta 8, Delta 9, CB2, 2CB. I had somebody come in the other day telling me about a psychedelic I'd never even heard of that they bought off the dark web because their friend had told them. I mean, it's a lot. And there's a way that it's all considered good, whether it's the protein maxing or, the longevity supplements and nootropics. And so I do remind people that there's a lot of simplicity and a lot of mental fitness to be had through some of these, simple tenets and simple act. And so healing the modern brain is, again, what is it about the modern world that we can kind of see and agree on has thrown our mental health off, right? To get out of this, let's debate whether Prozac works or not. It's like, I don't know. That debate isn't a debate. That's a conversation between a clinician like me who's given a lot of people Prozac and keeps up on the science of it. Prozac, by the way, is an amazing central brain anti-inflammatory. No one really talks about that part. And a patient who might need it. Those are the only two people who should be talking about Prozac in my mind, and what you see is this kind of obsession with that type of thinking as opposed to what new science tells us. Serotonin's huge, involved, important, but boy, so is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, so is interleukin-6, so is how much you go out in the world and see nature and connect with people and take care of your microbiome and eat more plants and fermented foods. And there are all these things that you can do. Go dancing this Friday. So I hope, again, with this idea of the modern brain, also people hear, modern challenges, but, I still am pretty excited, optimistic, like more solutions, more science, more opportunity. I go to the grocery store. I see more cool things to eat than ever before that are healthy for me. I see more people engaging in it, moving their bodies, being healthy, wanting to build community. So, in the midst of all the challenges we have right now, let's, not ignore those. If you attend to it, value the self, I think you can have a better mental health than ever before in human history.
I agree. Thank you so much. Drew, is there one final piece of advice that you want to leave our listeners with today?
I've been thinking a lot about listening more deeply. And I think that might surprise people. I listen for a living. I don't know. I probably spent like 40,000 hours listening to people. That's my couch right there. I've listened. I had 6-7 sessions today. So about 6.5 hours of listening.
Wow.
Like any professional skill, it's something that just I really enjoy. I've gotten very comfortable at, how do you be in an active, dynamic, ongoing conversation? But I find myself, even with all of that experience, coming back to a notion of how can I listen more deeply? And I think in that, I'll share the kind of piece of advice that drives that is early in my career, I asked one of my mentors, I said, do you have some advice for me? I'm starting my practice, and he says, remember to stay ignorant and stay humble. Mm-hmm. And it really struck me like I'd just finished training. I trained at Columbia, a very fancy place, right? I know so much. And I stay ignorant. What a crappy marketing plan. Hi there, I'm Dr. Ignorant, and then it really struck me. Being in the stance of really not knowing means that I'm always needing to learn. I'm always needing to be curious. It can be harder, right? Because my security can't come from dominating people because I know more and know better. And I think a lot of us get security from I know the facts, I'm right. And I've really worked harder to be in the stance of I don't need to know to be secure. I just need to listen more deeply. And I found that to be truer and truer as I've gotten older, my ability to kind of listen and hear and be curious. So listen more deeply, everybody. Stay humble. Stay optimistic right now is a really not falsely optimistic, like everything's going to be great. Optimistic that your efforts matter. Your efforts matter. It starts with you and your health. It matters. Your decisions matter. It starts then extends to your family and your loved ones. As I say in podcasts like this, if you've got mental health, pass it on. If you need some mental health, I hope something that was talked about today in our time together helped you. I could give you an idea. Maybe it's lentils. Maybe you hadn't thought about pesto. It's happened to me with hummus the other day. I hadn't thought about hummus for 6 months. I was like, whoa. I was like, hummus, check that out. It's so good. I love hummus.
I love it.
So I hope it's helpful. Eileen, thank you so much for sharing your community with me. Everyone who's listening, please give me a follow on Instagram or check out some of my other work. We've got lots of free downloads. I have some really fun e-courses that kind of the slow jam version of this. If you want me kind of in your ear talking through food categories, setting weekly goals, check out one of my courses or my other books. I'm really glad that our paths have crossed even here on this podcast for a little bit, just to get to talk about mental fitness and help you hear about the science of nutritional psychiatry. And I hope it helps.
Amazing. Everyone, I'll leave the link so you can learn more about Drew Ramsey down below. But thank you so much, Drew, for coming on here today, for sharing your knowledge and your very calm energy. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it, Eileen. Take care.
Thanks so much for listening to The Lavendaire Lifestyle. If you like the podcast, please show your support by leaving a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can also subscribe to our podcast YouTube channel at youtube.com/Lavendaire Lifestyle and follow our Instagram at Lavendaire Lifestyle. Sending you so much love. Bye.